Hey friends, we're back. It's Locked On Twins, and today Answer Dave Brown and your friend Brandon are going to talk about if we think the Twins are going to make a signing before the new year, because let me tell you, friends, it's coming up soon. But this is Locked On Twins.
You are Locked On Twins, your daily Minnesota Twins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello again, and welcome back to Locked On Twins. I'm your host, Brandon Warren, and you can unfollow me on Twitter at Brandon_WARNE, and joined by my wonderful friend, Answer Dave Brown. Answer Dave Brown, how are we doing this eve?
Hi, Brandon. Very festive. We finally got some snow, like crystals in the Kansas City area, at least in the air. So it was not a white Christmas, but it's now almost a white post-Christmas.
Well, we got almost 2.5 inches of rain here in the Twin Cities. So it, not great, but we'll take it as it comes. This is, again, as I said, Locked On Twins, a little late night Locked On Twins edition. Thanks for making Locked On Twins your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, also on YouTube, and of course, as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is your team every day. Again, I encourage you to give us a thumbs up in the comments. Thank you, FTL Nova Kid, and anybody else who wants to click thumbs up or wants to click subscribe, all that fun stuff. Your 5-star reviews help us immensely on Apple Podcasts and anywhere else you can give reviews. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started, and we'll have a little bit more about that later on in the show. Dave Brown, did you have a good holiday? I suppose we are kind of getting back to people after a little bit of time off. We did have a show late last week, or maybe it was even Saturday. But we're getting back into the swing of things.
Time is bent and twisted. Who knows when the last show was? Really, it's that time of year where the holiday comes in. The holiday was good because the kids enjoyed the holiday, and my daughter also had a birthday today. The day after Christmas, so that's kind of a back-to-back kind of wham kind of
you
thing.
You say she's gonna be 10? Is that right?
12. She's going to be 12. She was 11, and she just turned 12 today. So it's amazing how fast time flies, as the parents out there know. I think it's a little bit with the pandemic. We kind of lost some time there, a couple years, and then it also twisted our perception of time. Not to get all Stephen Hawking, but so things have gone by faster here in these last few years than maybe they would have at another time in our history. But it's amazing how quick they grow up. So
no, for real. We're coming up on 4 years since the world was sent into a tizzy in March of 2020. So again, time flies even when you're not having fun. But Dave, what was the most prudent gift that you got, or what are you enjoying the most? Because my wife replaced the earrings that I lost, which was certainly
I was
nice.
going to ask about those.
Yeah, I got a bread maker, so going to learn how to make some bread. We'll see how that goes. But I think my favorite thing was
exactly.
so I was happy.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I like prudent gifts. It's always good to get things that you would get and maybe you wouldn't buy for yourself, or just things that you like that, everybody knows what I'm talking about. I actually asked for a beverage machine. A few years ago, I stopped drinking soda pop. I don't know if you call it pop or soda in the Twin Cities.
I call it either or.
Right. So I just drink like carbonated water, like mineral water. Topo Chico is my favorite. If you're out there, the polar stuff. I don't know if you have that brand.
Yes,
I like
we do.
that too. That's my favorite kind of stuff. And now I find like, I used to kill like orange soda pop, and sometimes I was a Sprite man.
Yep.
too sugary now. And this really, I get my sugar other ways. So I'm still addicted to that.
Yeah.
But I don't drink pop anymore. And it's helped me become at least a little healthier. Anyway, so the practical thing that I got a beverage fridge. My sister-in-law gave me a beverage fridge so I can load up on my waters and not take up all the space in the fridge with the typical stuff that you put in the fridge. You can't have both. And we don't, I don't necessarily like have ice. So ice isn't necessarily a solution because it waters it down, although it is water already. So it is a little confusing. It's just a matter of personal taste, but very extremely practical, prudent, pragmatic gift. And I appreciate it dearly.
Well, of course, you talk about not drinking soda. I guess I call it soda. And then I show you that I'm drinking an Olipop before the show. So really good example I'm being. And anyway, Dave, the Twins have still not signed a major league free agent, much to the dismay of John Becker of Roster Resource, who checks out these things. So I went ahead and I broke down each year under the Falvey and Levine regime. They took over in 2016.
It's a rhyme.
There you go. Yeah, I didn't even poet and didn't know it. And so this is year 8. Still haven't made a free agent signing. And we're not quite to the latest that they've made their first big league signing. Now, I scrolled through. Baseball Reference actually has the transaction tracker. You can do MLB trade rumors. I'm not going to browbeat you over it. But I did pick the first signing I considered significant. Yeah. So, like the 1 year they signed, I'm trying to think, like Danny Coulomb was a minor league signing, so I didn't really count him. Jake Odorizzi signed a qualifying offer, I believe, in 2019 in November. I don't really count that, but I did write it down.
It's their own guy, it's not the same thing.
So to me, in the 1 year, Coulomb had been a free agent and came back. He had dealt with some stuff and signed a minor league deal. So we're going to go down that list. But what we'll do is let's talk about one thing first. We'll go to break and then come back. Is your personal inclination right now that the Twins are behind a bit because of having not signed anybody? Because as I recall in 2020, I think it was New Year's Eve, the Twins announced signing Rich Hill and Homer Bailey, like one after the other, same date, the 31st of December. Yeah. So we're not quite to that point yet, but they had already signed someone before that. So they're not the answer to 2020. Long way of saying, are you kind of feeling like, yeah, they really should do something here pretty soon?
I do feel the angst of the of average Joe and Jolene Twins fan of wanting them to do something to get things going. But remember earlier in our conversation about how time is twisted and so forth. It's a little twisted at this time of year because of when the holidays are. And if you look at how transactions were coming into the winter meetings, people were doing things and it looked like, well, we're going to get like a steady flow here. Right. And then the winter meetings came and just kind of gummed up the works. And you had a gummed up winter meetings where there weren't a lot of transactions. And then you have
opposite.
Yes, the holidays here. And I don't know, Christmas being on a Monday with Christmas Eve being on a Sunday. I mean, I'm half kidding here when I say this, but
no, I get it.
It's long story short, there's no need to worry about it. There isn't a huge amount of activity going on. It's not like everybody's doing something except the Twins. So I think, there's a little bit of that going. It's a strange time of year, but then you noted the Rich Hill transactions on Christmas Eve. In these next couple of days, I would not be surprised if we see something to remove that blockage, if you will, and get something going for the Twins. I think it's going to happen any second.
Well, and I think the Twins did not make a move today out of respect for the Quick Lane Bowl, Gophers winning 30-24, so that they didn't finish 5-8. Imagine going to a bowl game, losing and being 5-8.
How did they go to a bowl game when they had a losing record? Is that what you're telling me?
They were short a team or two It was like 68 bowl spots and 66 teams won 6 games or more. So the Vikings, the Gophers won based on strength of schedule or some dumb thing. But I digress frequently. Let's talk about our friends at FanDuel when we come back here. And then I'm going to break down with Dave Brown. Ooh, there's another rhyme. The first signings for each Twins offseason under Falvey and Levine, and see if we really think the Twins are behind the 8 ball. But first, like I said, a word from FanDuel. So our friends at FanDuel are letting you know that as the winter gets colder, the NFL offers stay hot on FanDuel. You're coming down the pipe here. I think fantasy championships for a lot of leagues in season long are next weekend. But right now, new customers on FanDuel can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Or like I said, mitigate your misery by betting against your team because you're guaranteed to win. Play both sides. I have no problem with it. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, though, there's no better time than the present to get in on the action. The app is super easy to use with a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, overs and unders, and much, much more. And again, right now, $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel is an official partner of the NFL. All right, Dave, we're back. We're into the bullpen here. A couple segments to go on this edition of Locked On Twins. And so we went back. The Twins hired Derek Falvey and Thad Levine in the fall of 2016. They fired Terry Ryan after I think it was called a total system failure was the phrase that was dubbed for it. Rob Antony, who we recently talked about as leaving the Twins, took over as the interim GM. And you know what? I misspoke. Rob Antony traded for Eduardo Nunez when Rob was the interim, when Terry Ryan was diagnosed with cancer. And then Rob traded him to the Giants when he was the interim after Terry was fired. And that's where the story had come full circle. I was trying to remember why Eduardo Nunez was so thankful when Rob Antony traded him and traded for him. So I had to remember the order of operations. But the first offseason, they signed Jason Castro on November 30th. In 2017, they signed Michael Pineda. Granted, a damaged Michael Pineda. They did the 2-year deal where the first year's a rehab, second year's kind of that's your guy. They did it that year. I think Drew Smiley did it with the Cubs too. That was December 13th. 2018, the Twins signed Jonathan Scope on December 6th. 2019, as we noted, Jake Odorizzi on November 14th. Doesn't really count for our purposes here. But Alex Avila and Michael Pineda both signed on December 10th. So first 4 years, we're 2+ weeks beyond that pace. In 2020, the first signing I found was Hansel Robles on December 29th. Now, depending on when you're listening to this will be 2 or 3 days from now. And then J-Hap and Andrelton Simmons. J-Hap was January 22nd, Andrelton Simmons January 31st. And Dylan Bundy in 2021. Now, when I say 2020, it's the end of 2020 going into 2021, just so that there's no confusion. Dylan Bundy at the end of 2021 on December 1st. And then last year it was December 16th when they signed Christian Vasquez. About 4 days later was Joey Votto. So they have a pattern of excessively slow moving off seasons. And if you look at each of those moves individually, I would say they probably are similar amounts of needle movers outside of maybe Robles and or Bundy, although the expectations for Bundy were probably a little higher. So I think more along the lines of they're not afraid to make a move early, but their big moves usually come late. Your Carlos Correas, your even your Logan Morrisons, your Marwin Gonzalez's, your Lance Lynn's.
Morrison.
Yeah, right. For whatever reason, he and I got along really well. That probably says not that much about me, though. So when you assess, though, all those signings and dates, it's hard not to feel like, all right, guys, it's about time to do something, right?
Yeah. I mean, like I said before, I sympathize with the fans who kind of want things to get going. And it does seem like we're getting on with, we're getting toward the season here a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And we want to have the Twins do something, but at the same, in the same instance, it's still early. It's early in the grand scheme of things. B,
Yep.
it's there's still a lot of players on the board.
Right.
There have been a couple of moves that other teams have made as far as bigger names that I thought, well, that person maybe would have been interesting to the Twins, but as far as depth and guys down the rung a little bit, it's not like we're running out of spots. It's not like the music's about to stop and we're playing musical chairs. So I think just we're going to mentally stay the course here and expect the Twins to make a couple of moves here before the turn of the year, and then things will really pick up after the first.
Well, and this isn't quite the off season where Bryce Harper needed time to sign, and I think Manny Machado had a year where he took a while to sign, and so I mean we're not quite to that point. And I guess maybe what's tricky is that there weren't many players of that caliber available, so it was more along the lines of waiting for Yamamoto and Ohtani, both of whom have somehow landed in the same place. But I like your point. Like, it's almost like they're running out of runway, but they're not running out of
airplanes.
Yeah, they have enough airplanes, but they're running out of runway. Like there's still plenty of airplanes. You can pick one,
right?
But it's just a matter of can you land this thing? Very, very good.
Will there be space? No, I think you just I understand what you're trying to say, and I think that there's plenty of fodder out there for moves. Like is the Kiermaier thing, has that happened?
So that's one I wanted to bring up. Kevin Kiermaier to the Blue Jays for $10.5 million. There was some chatter about if he was a fit for the Twins. At $10.5 million, I'm not really sure, but a fit for what the Twins are trying to do. But it sounds like I think they're going to put a lot of eggs in the Byron Buxton is healthy enough to play center field most of the time basket. Now, if you could acquire a player like Kevin Kiermaier to mix and match, that would be nice. But you'd probably want someone more along the lines of like an ARB1 guy, ARB2 guy who another team maybe just doesn't have a use for, and you can have them at a reasonable price for the next year or two, depending on what you need, as opposed to Kevin Kiermaier can sign wherever he wants. He's probably going to want a starting job or something close to it. You probably can't promise that. So it was probably not the best fit, but there's no denying that Kevin Kiermaier would have made a ton of sense for this team.
Not the best fit if, like you put your finger on it, I think, if they are optimistic about Buxton being
and they seem to be.
Play.
Yeah.
So I think that's, there were a couple of reports that were positive about Buxton. Mm-hmm. It was sort of vague, but it's like maybe the Twins can consider this guy, good to go, or he feels as good as he has in a couple of years, or something of that nature. Not anything like too specific or too direct, but some good early signs that Buxton, at least at this point, is going to be able to play center field, and that's good news for the Twins. And a person like Kiermaier wouldn't make as much sense if Buxton's going to play. They have guys, Willie Castro and whoever else you want to put out there who could, who can back up. And Michael Taylor is still out there, and if they want to bring him back as insurance as well. So I think that's the takeaway there, and that is positive news. I mean, it's really positive news if Buxton can play center field.
Well, I wanted to circle back to that point you were kind of hinting at. Michael A. Taylor was discussed by the Blue Jays. At least that's how it was reported. I'd be curious if that means he could find himself back in Minnesota. If Kiermaier didn't get a multi-year deal, and again, maybe he didn't feel like he needed to hold out for one, or maybe he knew based on how this offseason is going that if he held out for that, he might be stuck holding the bag in February when everyone's going to spring training. With that said, what do you think a number for Michael A. Taylor would be on a 1-year deal? I mean, he had a nice year. He does not do some things you want a hitter to do, but he also popped 20 homers. Do you think he's in that $7.5–8 million mix, or is he going to push to get what Kiermaier got just based on his relative similarity?
Well, Kiermaier's got more of he's a little older, but he's got more of a history of producing a little bit more offensively, not super amount, but so it's hard to say. And here's kind of how I want to answer that question. It's an interesting question. When I see something like Kiermaier in this get a 1-year contract, it makes the cynical person in me think that, the non-Ohtani Yamamoto class of free agents in this group are getting a vibe of we don't have enough money. I would have expected a 2 or 3 year deal, at least a 2-year deal, if not a 3-year deal. Multiple dozens of millions of dollars for Kiermaier, coming off the decent year that he had, and given the environment of so many teams, at least it seems like, needing outfielders. But he can't get a multi-year deal. It's suspicious to me, and it makes me think that there's something going on with the teams that is along the lines of, let's say, salary suppression. And
middle class gets kind of screwed, if we're honest. Like, if you want to look at dollars per WAR, which is, it's not perfect, but it's at least a guideline. The middle class gets screwed. Like, if you're a 2.0 win player, or like a 1.8 to 2.2, like a really nice player, nobody's giving that guy $14 million a year.
Right.
It just is what it
is. And if teams are, being hardliners about that, then we go back to the earlier questions that we asked in the show. Why are things kind of slow? That's a reason right there. That the activity on the 2.0 players, as you call them, the middle ground WAR guys, is not popping. So that's why all this other stuff has been kind of slow to a halt, or at least a big reason why.
That's where teams can be opportunistic, though, because if you're a team like the Twins that needs to fill in a gap or a blank, I mean, and you go grab a Donovan Solano for $3, $4, $5 million, like, that's an invaluable resource for you. It's like trading for Brandon Drury. It's like finding yourself getting Gio Urshela or Eduardo Escobar back. Those guys aren't going to turn the Royals around, but they're those nice key cogs for a pretty good team who might get hurt, might need some help. Like I've beat the drum for, Solano was third in the team in plate appearances. So it is nice to have those spot fillers. There is one free agent who signed that I really wondered about them as a fit for the Twins. Probably was never a very strong fit, but Mitch Garver got 2 years and $24 million with the Mariners. Again, not a perfect fit with Minnesota, but in theory, Mike Napoli 2.0 for me would have made some sense. Good for him for getting a multi-year deal. If you're listening to this, he's probably older than you think. Go check out his age. But good for him for getting that. I cannot say that I'm surprised the Twins didn't go that route.
Yeah, and thinking about like what he would have been useful to them as a right-handed bat. You want Ryan Jeffers to catch most of the time. I'm pretty sure that they'll want Cal Raleigh to continue to catch most of the time. The Mariners are also in a position where they have been not spending any money, and they needed to spend something on. They've been getting dinged for it in the press and by the fans for kind of being cheapskates. So coming off the success that they had a couple years ago. So that's I thought, well, that Mitch Garver for he had a heck of a season last season at the plate. And it's that's kind of, we talked about Kiermaier's contract being an indicator of things. That's another indicator that people aren't necessarily spending on those mid-level players, because you would have thought that somebody could have used a bat like Garver's, especially if you're putting him in a situation where it's not, he's not going to be a catcher and he's not going to be dinged up. As a DH goes, like the Cubs, that would have made perfect sense for them. They need a bat like that in the middle of the lineup. Just thinking of a team off the top of my head. So
it cuts both ways, though, the availability versus innovate. If you're available and you're a DH, or you're available half the time as a catcher, like those might have the same value to a lot of teams.
That's true.
And he only played 80 games last year. So I still think the bat plays. And if you put him in a spot where he can play 115, 120 games, you will be glad that you did, even if it's as a DH.
Yeah. So definitely a really a big bat and a good player, and is going to be useful. I mean, I don't know where the Mariners are going right now as a team, but it's a good signing on that part. There was another part of the Garver equation. I can't remember what I was going to bring up, but maybe if we just start talking, it'll jar loose in my head. So.
Well, we talked about Nico Goodrum hitting lefties. Garver would have been able to do that for whoever he signs with. Someone who will catch a lot, Martin Maldonado landing with the White Sox. We saw this with the Twins back in the first year of Falvey and Levine, but they signed Jason Castro. They went the defensive route. The Twins obviously picking someone a little more offensive-minded back then. But I don't think it's a bad move to get a foundational defensive catcher. You're going to have a lot of pitchers coming through that you want to have a good receiver for. He kind of reminds me of like late career Jose Molina. And it's an interesting signing for a team like the White Sox. I would guess it's a one-year deal, maybe $6, $7, $8 million. I don't know if you differ there. But I'm not worried about it that much. In real life, it would make sense, especially if you have a younger catcher you want to learn from. But it doesn't move the needle that much for me one way or the other.
No, and obviously the White Sox have a little bit of a different approach this year with Chris Getz as the GM instead of Rick Hahn and Kenny Williams. And Maldonado played with Getz, or played for the Royals. I don't remember if Getz was on the roster at the time, but so
probably one way or the other,
right? But they have a familiarity, and so it makes sense from that standpoint. And you're right about Maldonado being able to do the things that he does on defense, and that certainly is helpful to the White Sox. They, there isn't anything that the White Sox don't need. I mean, they need a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and then like more of the same. Mm-hmm. So it makes sense from that point. It doesn't, move them any closer to contention, but he'll teach the young pitchers a thing or two. And maybe they have a kid, Corey Lee, who they got in a trade from the Astros last year, who definitely could use some pointers on defense. So
they got
it's got a good arm, but other than that, kind of whatever.
They in the trade for Giolito too. I think they got Edgar Cuero.
Yeah, right.
So they have some young catchers who could use the help.
I don't know how, I'm not sure if he's going to be, I would imagine that he'll be invited to spring training. He'll certainly be around. So you're right. That's a decent, he's more of an up and comer than the guy they have now. So any pointers, Maldonado, it might pay off in a couple of years when you have players like that know what they're doing on defense. So that's more, there's more than one reason why you sign a guy. So that's good for him, good for the White Sox, but not a threat to the Twins at the moment.
Right. We'll end with this, and it's a good sayonara note because it's a pretty good indicator. Wander Franco raided. They don't find him, so you can read up on it if you want. I'm not going to go into great detail because it's not Twins related, but I think you and I can both agree he's played his last major league inning, don't you think?
Well, I had heard some stories about what maybe the police were going to do. Before this happened, and I thought, well, maybe there was a possibility. Well, maybe he'll cut a deal or whatever, or maybe we'll see him again. But no, it's when the authorities are looking for you in the Dominican Republic, and they're raiding two of your houses, and they're that's a situation where any road back to the major leagues is way too long to even think about. So Wander Franco, it's just kind of a terrible story about how, somebody with the whole world at his feet, appears to be, ruining it in real time for himself. And, who knows what his alleged victims have gone through. It's a terrible thing to consider.
Yeah, we don't want to diminish anything that they've gone through, and hopefully with everything that comes to light, it will be punished as necessary. But before we go, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. So make sure you check that out. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, easy for me to say, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Now, with that said, answer Dave Brown. This was fun. Thanks for carving out some time. I know it was a big day for you. Obviously around the holidays too is tough. So let's plan to do this again soon. Maybe even tomorrow. How does that sound?
Yeah, let's do it. Thanks.
Maybe the Twins will give us something to discuss. But
throw us a bone.
Yeah, right. Until then, thanks for hanging out. Man, I'm a mess. Thanks for hanging out with us. You've been listening to Locked On Twins, and we'll see you tomorrow night.